I was laughing because I read this book about sleep. It's called Why We Sleep, and it was talking about how our sort of natural circadian rhythms are not built to accommodate the 9 to 5. I was like, what if I could present this at some sort of leadership meeting and go, actually, this is really conflicting with my circadian rhythm?
I'm sure you would find a sympathetic ear there, and they would say, you know, Mary, you're right. Let's just change. Let's change our business model. We're not focused on businesses that are running 9 to 5 in other areas, so why should we?
Well, because they did this study, right? And it was like a Greek island that also did siesta. I don't know what the Greek word for siesta is, but they did it anyway. And they stopped them. So it was like a scientific study. They stopped all these like mid-30s, super healthy young guys from having siesta for a year. And in a year, within that group, the rates of like heart disease, stroke, heart attacks, stress-induced like panic attacks, stuff like that had absolutely shot through the roof. So like a mid-afternoon nap is life-saving.
Yeah. Because it kind of fits in with where they're living and everything as well. You know, you're taking advantage of, well, obviously good weather and a nice climate and everything, and you're out during the day when it's actually quite nice, rather than, you know, I mean, obviously we don't have a nice climate that we can go out and have a refreshing walk in a park or anything, you know, so yeah. I
mean, it might be refreshing, but only in the fact that you'd be absolutely hosed down by the time you came back. We're a climate that's surely built for hibernation more than anything else.
Yeah, you don't hear of many Scottish people dying of like dehydration. You know, it's not that type of place.
Although, did you see the thing on the news the other day? Because they'd found, I think it was like some Scottish island, and they'd been able to trace the stone that was sort of in the mountains back to like, I don't know, before the world split up into different continents, right? And it showed you that, that when we were all like one continent before things started to drift, Scotland was actually a tropical climate. So we absolutely got the shit end of the stick and then some.
Yeah. Between that and the football team,
Yes.
Just gubbed.
Maybe they would be better though if we still lived in a tropical climate, because they would want, you know, it must be hard to motivate yourself to go out in weather like such as we have today and go, I'm going to play, you know, I'm going to train, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
I'm going to do anything, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's not conducive to good mental health, really, is it? If you're trying to say, you know, you shouldn't be taking lots of drugs, you should be getting regular exercise, you should be getting outdoors, getting a bit of fresh air. But you see that and you go, come on, really?
I know, it's fuck this, I'm not getting out my pajamas, basically.
Yeah. Aye, pretty much, yeah. It's not been great. So what have you been doing anyway, apart from that this weekend? Anything interesting?
So I had did the Well Good Movies podcast on Friday, which was an absolute hoot, like genuinely like could not stop laughing, and I actually won the quiz at the end, which never happens.
Nice.
So I wanted that like sort of memorized for posterity. And then I actually got to interview Alexandra Rappaport this week, the Swedish actress, and she was so lovely. Like I was absolutely shutting myself. But she was super chatty, and I only had 15 minutes with her. So I was like, oh, listen, I'm conscious that, you know, we're coming up to the 15 minutes mark. And she was like, no, let's just stay and talk. I was like, oh,
nice. Oh, that's good. It's a sign of a really good interview then.
Yeah, so I think it went really well, and she's obviously shared it on her like Instagram and stuff like that. So I think it's gone quite well. But she was really lovely, and obviously just somebody who's very like involved in everything. So she was explaining that she was like an exec producer on the show that we were talking about, and like all the research and stuff that she does, and she's got her own production company, and she was just really interesting to talk to, because there's obviously a lot of different aspects. It's not she's just obviously turning up, learning her lines and doing it. She's obviously involved sort of way beyond that. So that was really interesting, and she was really funny as well, which was nice. And I said to her, like, do you want to like preview this before it goes out? And she was like, no, just make sure I sound nice. And that was it. So she was really lovely.
Yeah, it was a good piece. I read it. It was excellent. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
Very nice piece of writing, you know. Not that I expect any less of you, obviously, but you know what I mean. It's always nice to get a wee. So, yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
No, it was good. As I say, I kind of thought, sorry, my camera's just going back. I kind of thought 15 minutes, like I had loads and loads of questions prepped, because it felt like 15 minutes wasn't that long of an amount of time, but it's surprising how much you can rattle through.
Yeah, it depends how much your interviewee wants to chat about a specific subject. Your time can run away with you, and that's as you found, it's a skill to keep things going and try and get as many of your questions through as possible without sacrificing like the length of time of the answers and stuff as well. So yeah, it's something that you need to work on. Obviously, everybody needs to work on. It's not something you can. I can't take it for granted. I've done it a couple of times, as you know, but not that many. But enough to know that you need to keep things moving, and you try not to get sidetracked into something that's maybe not relevant and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's excellent. It's really good. So I take it you're going to be doing more of that.
Hey, I think so. I mean, it really depends. I'm kind of on that site just to do the reviews more than anything else, because Alex does a lot of the interviews, but he'd asked me to pick that one up because I was the person who'd actually watched the show, which she did ask me. She said, have you seen all the episodes? And I was like, yes, I've binge watched them all. So I said I would pick that up. Yeah, I mean, I'd be keen to do more because it is good practice, I guess, more than anything else, because I had obviously grouped my questions into sort of like themes, and then sometimes she would answer sort of other questions within one, if you know what I mean. And so you're kind of like, it is good practice, although as I say, I haven't done it in a very, very long time. So I was actually shitting myself. And then when she appeared and she was super friendly, I was like, oh, this is, I don't know what I was getting myself in a state for, because she's very chatty and it's very nice. But I would like to do more, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you must have sort of used your experience from work as well in that sort of thing, because obviously part of your job is being able to communicate effectively with people, so you'd be able to use a lot of those skills, I would imagine.
Yeah, it just I think for me, I was hyper focused on the time limit, which is something for next time not to panic about, because actually once people start talking like that, for example, she was like, I can see in chat, it's fine. There's obviously going to be people who are very restricted, but I think I was so hyper focused on the time limit that I was like trying not get distracted. But then she started asking me questions and I was like, oh, okay. So, but it was nice, and I think she appreciated that I had watched it all as well. It's a wee 8-part series, so I think she was actually, I assume, quite sometimes on junkets and stuff like that, they meet people who've maybe seen like one episode or a bit of an episode, whereas I actually had sat down and watched it all and done a season review and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's not common or whatever, but I think she was quite happy that I'd watched it. So
I would imagine it would be fairly common, because not to disrespect you in any way, but more professional interviewers, people who do that as their primary job, probably don't have the time to sit down and watch 8 hours of a program. They may watch one at the most. And sometimes with shows, you don't get all the shows as a preview anyway. It sometimes works out that way, that they maybe only get 1 or 2 episodes to actually watch, which can be quite frustrating, especially if a character's got an arc over a body of like 8 hours, because things are obviously going to change, or there's going to be some sort of development, and they would want to talk about that in some way, I would imagine. But yes, so Yara actually at a bit of an advantage in that that was specifically a task that you had, and you were able to watch everything. So yeah, and that keeps the conversation going as well, and it has it's a wee bit of initial trust as well between two parties, because you've invested time in their product, and they're obviously there. Like I said to you before, I think you asked me a question before for somebody else who was going to be doing interviewing, and it's always a case of you're there because they want to talk about their product. They're trying to sell themselves. They're trying to sell them their show or their movie or whatever. So the onus is on them to talk. So the onus isn't on you. The onus is on you to prompt them in a way that it's going to be interesting. Not the same, what's your motivation for taking the role? That kind of idea. Get
money.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's usually the answer. So that cuts the conversation stone dead. So I always spend a wee bit of time trying to figure out sort of interesting things, something that they wouldn't normally get asked without being super weird. It was really, really strange.
Well, I did ask her, because obviously she's done a couple of sort of crime shows. I did ask her if she thought she'd make quite a good detective in real life, and she was absolutely gutting herself. She was just like, "This is great." And then she thought about it, and she was like, "Yeah." She was like, "I actually would." She was like, "Because I read like lots of crime novels." She was like, "And usually I get a few pages into it, and I fold the page over, and I go, right, I know who's done it." And she was really like, I think when you can make somebody laugh as well, because I imagine like it must be quite boring doing that part of the job, because you probably do get the same, 5 or 6 questions over and over again. And that's why I think in a way it's a wee bit unfair sometimes. Like now when you see actors and whatever, and they're like, oh, they were so grumpy on this junket or whatever, or they were like, I do think it's probably because they're bored of like, how many ways can you answer, as you say, what's your motivation for taking the role beyond a paycheck, So,
and especially like you mentioned, like you had 15 minutes, so you were in a schedule. So you've got to imagine that they probably do, say, 3 15-minute interviews in an hour, given a wee bit of space in between to set up, a wee drink and what have you. So they may be spending all day doing that. They may be spending 8 hours, say, that's their day, just doing interviews. So that's 24 interviews in a day.
Yeah. And
you would think maybe about 60 or 70% of the questions would be exactly the same.
Yeah.
So, it is pretty soul destroying. It really is,
It's funny because I remember reading Alan Rickman's diaries, which is such a great read, but he makes acting sound really boring. Like that side of it, like doing the junkets and stuff like that, but also just even being on set. Like, sometimes his diaries, like, waited in the rain for 7 hours to get one shot set up. It didn't work. I need to do this all over again tomorrow, sort of thing. And it did make it sound like so, whatever the opposite of glamorous is, that's exactly what he made it sound. Because it's funny, because you always think of it like, oh, it must be so nice being like pampered and doing this and doing that. It actually did sound like a lot of hard work and also just a lot of time wasting.
Yes, like I say, they can get through very little in a day. But that's where the fact that a lot of actors move into production as well and take executive producer credits and things like that, and actually get involved, so that it is more interesting for them, because they're not sitting about all the time and doing other stuff. And obviously he did that himself. He directed a couple of films. And I think that was partly to do with that, to make it more interesting for him. So he was actually felt he was accomplishing something. But yes, it must be, because actors a lot of the time they train for the stage. They can train for the stage and the screen, obviously, but they want to get scenes done and they want to move through it. They don't want to just have to do 2 lines and then say, right, we'll stop that there and we'll move on to the next setup. Another 3 hours or whatever. And that can be pretty grim. That's why films go on so long. In terms of the production, it's like months and months, and sometimes you wonder exactly what they're doing with it, but that's what it is. It's because there's such big productions.
And I just imagine a big set piece, like say it's like a big battle scene or something, and imagine getting halfway through that and it'd be like, cut, we've realised that so-and-so's out of place, or we can't see that. Like, can you imagine having to like restage all of that all over again? It must be, I mean, interestingly, like, and I'm sure I said the same thing to you about when Viggo Mortensen was talking about this at the film festival. Like in Alan Rickman's books as well, he talks about, and again, I think this was post Harry Potter, maybe one of the films he directed, like how hard it was for somebody like him, who's definitely a name, Die Hard, all that sort of thing, to actually get the time and the money and the crew and all that to come and work with him to direct a film, which again I'm always really surprised about, because you just think that he is quite a big name, surely that would mean that people will be throwing money at him to direct something or whatever, but it's not always the case.
No, because it's a different dynamic. They want to see his name above the titles, and you only get that with these sort of auteur directors. You don't even get it with, well, a lot of the time with Steven Spielberg. You don't see a Steven Spielberg film, so you wouldn't see an Alan Rickman film unless he was the star of it as well, and in that case that's slightly different again. But people are reluctant to put money into things that they don't have name recognition, and it may be a more difficult sell. It's an investment thing. They want to invest in something that they're going to get their money back and more. So the fact that you'll have a film star actually promoting it all the way through, because you can be guaranteed of that, because if it's their product, they're going to. There's very few occasions when a director steps away from a product. I know it happens, all the Alan Smithy stuff and all that, but most of the time. So if you've got the combination of a film star who is also the director, going on all the TV shows and promoting the stuff, then there is that. But it's much easier just to put money into a bigger name film with a film star, a bigger film star or whatever. It makes more sense. But yes, it's really, really difficult to raise money for any sort of endeavor like that.
Because I suppose a lot of like actors, certainly, because I was reading an interview with Denzel Washington the other day, and he was saying like they're so there's very few projects that he gets sent these days that actually interest him. And I guess like with Alan Rickman, with Viggo Mortensen, with other actors who've gone into directing, they obviously want to pursue a project that interests them, but that's not to say that that's a project that's going to interest a studio or a finance house or whatever. So I guess there's a sort of disconnect between what they think is going to make good cinema and what somebody, you know, who writes the checks thinks.
Yeah. It was the same with Reese Witherspoon as well. She wasn't getting offered roles of any sort of substance at all over television and film. So she actually started her own film production company in order not just to promote her, but to promote the types of films that she wanted to see and wanted to be in, obviously. And it's obviously been very, very successful. There's been a lot of sort of output from that, and she's sort of come back into the limelight because of that. But it's not just promoting her, it's promoting the whole, you know, stories that people want to see. It's not just this very, very formulaic approach, which we get all the time to varying degrees of success, let's face it. So.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I think there's a lot of actors that probably want a wee bit more control over that sort of thing because, I mean, there is so few. I say there is so few. That's not fair. There's a lot of small and low budget films that are telling original stories. But I guess if you're wanting to get out there as a name, you need to jump into these kind of bigger projects, and they're probably quite lacking in the old originality department.
Yes, yeah, I'm afraid so. It is a bit of a strange one, and I don't think it'll change anytime soon, despite this summer being a profound disappointment in terms of box office receipts. A few films have obviously done well. I think we'll probably talk about that in more depth as well. I think we'll do a wee roundup, a summer movies roundup at some point. But yes, it has
with
been,
The Crow.
Yeah, it has been particularly disappointing, not in terms of the films themselves, but in terms of the way,
as you say, the receipts as well.
Yeah,
but I do think for Empire, which is usually very generous to big summer films, I think for them to turn around and give The Crow 1 star means it must be 10 times worse than that.
Yes, that was a bit of a surprise, yes.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait for the Guardians 1, 3, and 5 star thing that they'll come out with.
You never know, it might be a 1, 2, and 3 this time.
That's it. Yeah, they might not make it all the way to 5 for that. So
yeah, it's just I don't know. I really don't know. I obviously haven't seen The Crow yet, so I couldn't comment on it, but it's not boding well for it, let's face it.
No, but
having said that, cinema was really busy on Friday.
Yeah, and as I say, I went to see this in the IMAX at Silverburn, which is enormous, and it was full as well, which I was quite surprised at because it was about 10 minutes before the film, and there was maybe like 10 other people there apart from us, and I was thinking, God, this is going to be embarrassing if this is as full as this screen gets, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, it absolutely packed out, and I was like, oh, well, that's actually somewhat reassuring that there's a full house.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It makes a difference with these type of films. But it makes a difference in most films if you've got like sort of a big crowd in to watch it and they're respectful, which thankfully was the case on Friday. It was very respectful. There wasn't anybody being a dick. So
no. I did jump out my skin a couple of times, but I did so demurely, as the TikTok kids are saying these days.
Yep.
The thought of, because I suppose you could smother someone with a pillow. Stab them, and then can you overdose on Viagra and die? You could work
I'm sure you can. Yes, yeah, because it causes problems if you have an erection for too long. If you have it for hours and hours and hours. Yeah.
What is the spider? Is it like a Brazilian wandering spider or something like that? If you bite it, you basically get like an erection for 24 hours, and that could be fatal.
Yes. Yeah. Aye, because it's all got to do with blood flow, you know. Going into far too much detail here.
Oh no! Oh, please don't make that the opening.
No, I'm not making that the opening. Don't worry about that.